The storm raged across the alien world, black clouds swallowing the sky and red lightning splitting the horizon. The ground shook with each strike. Dust and ash filled the air, stinging the eyes, scratching the throat. It was not a place where life was welcome. It was a place that wanted to kill everything that walked upon it. But still one man walked. His name was Daniel. He wore a torn exploration suit, the visor cracked, the oxygen supply running low. His ship had crashed hours ago, leaving him stranded. Every step he took was heavy, every breath a fight. Yet his eyes scanned the wasteland with sharp focus. He had no choice but to keep moving. Then he saw it. Half buried in the sand was something unnatural, a metal pod shaped like a tear, its surface glowing faint blue. The storm had half covered it, but Daniel knew at once it was not human technology. The design was too smooth, too perfect, too alive. He moved closer, his boots sinking into the soft ash. The pod gave off a low hum like a heartbeat. A small hatch hissed open, spilling dim light into the storm. Daniel raised his weapon, unsure what waited inside, and then he heard it. A voice. Weak, trembling. Not human. He stepped closer, heart pounding. Inside the pod lay a girl. Her skin shimmered faint silver under the light. Strange glowing lines ran across her arms and neck like living tattoos. Her hair floated in the air as if touched by invisible wind. Her eyes, large, bright, and alien, looked at him with fear and pain. Daniel froze. This was no ordinary alien. She was young, fragile, and badly hurt. Blood, if it was blood, glowed faint blue on her side. She tried to speak, but the words were broken, twisted not from any human language. For a moment, Daniel thought of walking away. This was not his fight. He was already close to death. Saving her would mean dragging danger into his own life. But something deep inside him, something human, stopped him. He knelt down. Easy, he whispered, though she would not understand. I won't hurt you. Her glowing eyes softened for a moment, as if she understood more than he thought. Daniel looked at her wounds. The blood pulsed like liquid light. He tore strips from his own suit and wrapped them around her side, trying to stop the flow. She winced but did not resist. Suddenly, a loud roar echoed in the distance. The ground trembled again. Daniel looked up to see lights in the sky. Ships hunting, searching. He knew at once they were not friendly. Whoever they were looking for her, and if they found her, they would kill her. The girl's hand gripped his arm, weak but desperate. She whispered something, a single word. Daniel could not understand it, but the fear in her voice was clear. He had a choice. Leave her and maybe survive a little longer, or take her and risk everything. Daniel sighed, anger and determination burning in his chest. Damn it, he muttered. He lifted the alien girl into his arms. She was lighter than she looked, her body almost weightless, like carrying a shadow of light. The glowing lines across her skin pulsed brighter as if reacting to his touch. The pod behind them flickered, then powered down completely. He had no time to investigate. The hunters were getting closer. He stumbled through the storm, the girl held close. Each step was harder than the last. His oxygen meter beeped in warning, the red light flashing. The storm's roar swallowed his breath. The girl tried to speak again. This time Daniel understood a fragment. A broken phrase, but clear enough. Safe. Hide. Please. Her voice was like music, soft and trembling, carrying more emotion than words. Daniel pushed forward, forcing his body to keep going. He reached a cluster of rocks and crawled into the shadows. There he laid her down gently, covering her with scraps of cloth to shield her from the storm. Above them, the alien ships passed. Their beams of light cut through the storm, scanning the ground. One beam passed close, too close. Daniel held his breath, pressing himself against the stone, every muscle tense. The girl's glowing skin was hard to hide, but somehow the storm itself seemed to cloak them. The ships moved on. Daniel exhaled, heart pounding. He looked at the girl. She was still alive, though weak. Her eyes fluttered, watching him. She reached out and touched his face, her fingers cold but gentle. For the first time, Daniel saw not just an alien, but someone lost, someone hunted, someone in need. And in that moment, he made his choice. He would protect her. No matter what. The storm howled louder. The hunters were still searching. The night was far from over, but the rescue had begun. The storm did not end with the night. It raged on, tearing across the barren land with the fury of a living beast. Daniel crouched under the rocks, his arms wrapped around the wounded alien girl. Each breath he took came with a rasp from his failing oxygen supply. The girl trembled against him, her glowing skin casting faint light in the darkness, a light that could betray them at any second. Above, the sky burned with the glow of searchlights. The alien ship circled slowly, patient and merciless. They were hunting, and Daniel knew they would not leave until they found what they were looking for. He looked down at the girl. Her eyes opened slightly, glowing like twin stars in the storm. She whispered a broken word he could not fully understand. But the meaning was clear. They had to move. Staying here meant death. Daniel checked the scanner on his wrist. It was nearly dead, but one faint reading pulsed on the display. An underground cavern system about 3 kilometers east. If he could reach it, maybe they could hide long enough for the hunters to give up. He tightened his grip on his weapon, shifted the girl into his arms, and stepped back into the storm. The wind slammed against him, nearly knocking him off his feet. Ash and sand whipped his visor, reducing his sight to only a few meters. Still, he pushed forward, each step a battle against the storm and the fear clawing at his mind. The girl clung weakly to his chest. Her glowing lines flickered, dimming with every moment as though her very life was fading away. Daniel's pace quickened. He did not know what she was, but he knew she was dying. And if she died, then all of this would be for nothing. A sudden blast shook the ground behind him. Daniel turned his head just in time to see a beam of white energy cut through the rocks where they had been hiding moments ago. The hunters had found their trail. Adrenaline surged through him. He ran. His legs pounded against the shifting sand, his breath loud in his helmet. The girl whispered something in her strange voice, the word broken but urgent. He glanced back. One of the alien ships was lowering toward the ground, releasing tall, armored figures that glowed faintly in the stormlight. Their eyes burned red, scanning, calculating. They were closing in. Daniel fired his weapon behind him, short bursts of plasma cutting through the storm. The hunters dodged with unnatural speed, their armor reflecting the light like liquid metal. One of them raised a weapon and fired. A beam of energy screamed past Daniel's shoulder, missing him by inches. The ground exploded, sending shards of rock into the air. He stumbled, nearly falling, but forced his body to keep moving. The cavern system was close. He could see the faint outline of jagged cliffs ahead, rising like black teeth out of the sand. If he could reach them, there might be a chance. The girl lifted her hand weakly, pointing toward the cliffs. For a moment, Daniel thought he saw the glowing lines on her skin flare brighter, pulsing in rhythm with the storm itself. And then something strange happened. The storm seemed to shift around them, a sudden swirl of wind and ash forming a curtain between them and the hunters. The alien soldiers slowed, confused. Their scanners flickered with static. Daniel did not understand what had happened, but he wasn't going to waste the chance. He ran harder, his lungs screaming, his muscles burning. At last he reached the cliffs. He spotted a narrow crack in the rock half hidden by the storm. He slipped inside, squeezing through the jagged opening until the storm's roar dulled behind him. The girl gasped faintly, her eyes fluttering closed as he set her down against the cavern wall. The cavern stretched deep into darkness. Daniel switched on a weak light from his suit, revealing twisting tunnels and dripping stone. He could hear water somewhere far below, echoing like a whisper through the rock. He leaned against the wall, chest heaving, staring at the girl. She looked even weaker now, her glowing lines fading like dying embers. He reached for his med kit, desperate to help, but his supplies were almost gone. He managed to inject her with a stimulant, hoping it would stabilize her. For a moment, nothing happened. Then her body jerked, her glowing eyes snapping open. She let out a sound, half cry, half whisper, and the crystal shard tied around her neck flared with sudden light. A projection appeared in the air between them, a map of stars, shifting and alive. Daniel froze, staring at the glowing constellation. The girl raised her hand, pointing to one bright cluster of stars. Her voice was broken but urgent. "Save home. Hide." He realized she was showing him where she needed to go. But before he could say anything, the cavern shook violently. Dust rained down from the ceiling. The hunters had found the entrance. Daniel grabbed his weapon, his heart hammering. He glanced at the girl, then at the glowing map still floating in the air. He didn't know what he had gotten himself into, but he knew one thing for certain. He could not let her be captured. The sound of armored footsteps echoed in the tunnel. Red lights flickered in the darkness. The hunt was far from over, and the escape had only just begun. The cavern walls groaned as the storm outside pounded against the cliffs. Daniel pressed his back against the stone, his weapon raised, every nerve in his body on edge. The alien girl sat slumped beside him, her glowing skin faint like dying embers, the star map still hovering in the air above her crystal shard. Each pulse of light cast long shadows that danced across the jagged rock, making the cavern feel alive, as though it was watching them both. The sound of footsteps echoed down the tunnel. The hunters were inside. Their heavy boots struck the stone with mechanical precision, the sound carrying closer with every second. Red lights flickered in the darkness as scanners swept across the cavern walls. Daniel knew they had only minutes before the soldiers found them. He crouched beside the girl, trying to quiet his own breath. "What do they want from you?" he whispered. Even though he knew she could not fully understand, she looked at him with wide, glowing eyes. Fear and exhaustion etched into her alien features. Then she touched the crystal at her chest. The map above them shifted, zooming into the cluster of stars she had pointed to earlier. A small planet glowed brighter than the rest. Her trembling hand moved toward it. "Home," she whispered softly, her voice like broken glass but filled with meaning. Then she pressed the crystal against his chest as though trying to make him understand more. Suddenly, images flooded into Daniel's mind. Not words, not language, but visions. He saw her people, tall, luminous beings with glowing skin like hers, walking through cities made of crystal and light. He saw their ships sailing between the stars, beautiful and peaceful. And then he saw fire. War. Entire cities burning under the attack of the same hunters now stalking them in the cavern. The vision changed again. A laboratory, scientists from her species working frantically. They were creating something hidden inside her blood, something powerful. Daniel saw the hunters storming the lab, slaughtering her people, and the girl being carried away in a pod. Then it ended. Daniel gasped, his hand tightening on the weapon as he staggered back. The truth hit him like a punch to the chest. She wasn't just a refugee, she was carrying a secret inside her, something that terrified the hunters so much they would kill worlds to destroy it. "What the hell are you?" he whispered, his voice shaking. The girl blinked, her glowing eyes shimmering with tears. She tried to speak, but her words broke apart, lost between languages. One word was clear, though. She pressed her hand to her chest and whispered, "Key." Daniel froze. A key. She was the key to something far greater than either of them. He didn't know if that meant salvation or doom. The sound of metal scraping against stone pulled him back to reality. The hunters were close now, their weapons buzzing with deadly energy. Daniel looked down at the girl. She was too weak to move, her glowing lines fading faster. He cursed under his breath. If he stayed, they would both die here. If he ran, she would not survive without him. His eyes flicked to the star map again. That planet, her homeworld, was far away. Too far. He had no ship, no supplies, and his oxygen was nearly gone. It was madness. And yet he knew there was no turning back. The girl tugged at his sleeve, her voice trembling. "Safe, hide. Must go." She pointed deeper into the cavern. Daniel hesitated, then lifted her into his arms again. He moved quickly, his boots crunching on loose stone, the tunnel twisting into darkness ahead. Behind them, the hunters spread out, their red lights cutting through the black like knives. One of them raised its scanner and a harsh alarm shrieked. They had found the trail. Daniel ran faster, his lungs burning. The cavern widened into a vast chamber, its walls glittering with strange crystals. The girl stirred in his arms, her eyes glowing brighter as if the crystals resonated with her presence. For a moment the chamber filled with faint whispers like voices carried through stone. Daniel slowed, unease crawling across his skin. "What is this place?" he muttered. The girl reached out, touching one of the crystals. A sudden surge of light burst through the chamber, illuminating hidden carvings etched into the walls. Ancient symbols, spirals of stars, and depictions of figures who looked like her people. Daniel realized with a chill that this cavern was not just a hiding place. It was a sanctuary left behind by her ancestors. Before he could study it further, a blast tore into the chamber. The hunters had arrived. Energy beams ricocheted off the crystals, filling the air with light and thunder. Daniel dove behind a boulder, shielding the girl with his body as shards of stone exploded around them. He returned fire, his weapon blazing. One hunter fell, its armor smoking. But more poured in, relentless, their red eyes fixed on the girl. She clutched the crystal at her chest, her lips moving in a desperate chant. The chamber pulsed with light. The crystals around them began to glow, their whispers rising to a deafening hum. Daniel felt the ground tremble beneath him. The hunters hesitated, scanning the chamber with sudden unease. Then, with a blinding flash, a beam of energy erupted from the crystals, sweeping across the chamber. The hunters screamed as their armor cracked and burned, their weapons shorting out in a shower of sparks. Daniel shielded his eyes. When the light faded, the chamber was silent. The hunters lay broken on the ground. The girl collapsed in his arms, her glowing lines dimming once again. Daniel looked at the shattered hunters, then at the glowing sanctuary walls. He realized the truth. This wasn't just a hiding place. It was proof. Proof of her people's power. Proof of the secret she carried inside her. And if the hunters feared it this much, then maybe the entire galaxy had reason to fear it too. The cavern still echoed with the fading hum of the crystals. Daniel leaned against a jagged wall, chest heaving, his weapon trembling in his hands. Around him, the shattered remains of alien hunters lay smoldering, their once impenetrable armor cracked open like fragile shells. The air reeked of scorched metal and ozone. He looked down at the alien girl cradled in his arms. Her glowing lines had dimmed again, pulsing faintly as if her very life was slipping away. The crystal shard on her chest flickered with soft light, weaker now like a dying star. Daniel wiped the sweat from his brow, trying to ignore the pounding in his chest. He had fought and survived, but deep down he knew this was only the beginning. Then the cavern shook. The ground rumbled violently, dust falling in thin streams from the ceiling. Daniel froze, fear sliding into his bones. This wasn't the storm outside. This was something heavier, something deliberate. He staggered to his feet, holding the girl close, and stared toward the tunnel they had come through. The darkness shifted. A low growl filled the air, mechanical and menacing. Then the red lights appeared, dozens of them glowing like eyes in the shadows. The hunters had returned. Not just foot soldiers this time. Something larger moved among them, its heavy steps shaking the cavern floor. Daniel's breath caught as a towering figure emerged from the tunnel. It was nearly 3 times his height, armored in black metal that shimmered like liquid. Its face was hidden behind a helmet of jagged steel, with a single burning eye in the center. It carried a massive blade crackling with red energy, and its voice boomed through the cavern like thunder. "Return the key," it said in a language Daniel should not have understood. But somehow he did. The words cut directly into his mind, bypassing language, forcing their meaning onto him. The girl stirred weakly, her glowing eyes opening at the sound of the voice. She clutched at Daniel's suit, her fear radiating like fire. He realized at once that this creature was not just a hunter. It was a commander, and it wanted her more than anything. Daniel raised his weapon, though his hands shook. "You'll have to kill me first," he muttered, though his voice sounded small in the vast chamber. The commander stepped forward, each heavy footstep echoing like a drumbeat of doom. The soldiers followed, their weapons humming with deadly light. The cavern crystals glowed faintly, whispering in strange voices, but they did not erupt this time. Their earlier power seemed spent, leaving Daniel with nothing but his courage and his failing weapon. The girl whispered something, her words barely audible. Daniel bent his head closer. "What is it?" he asked. "Run," she breathed, her voice trembling. Too strong. "Must hide." Daniel clenched his jaw. Running seemed impossible. They were cornered, trapped in a cavern with only one exit, and it was filled with hunters. Still, he knew she was right. Standing and fighting would mean instant death. He had to find another way. He scanned the chamber desperately. On the far side, half hidden behind a wall of glowing crystals, he spotted a narrow fissure in the rock. It wasn't much, but it might lead deeper into the tunnels. Daniel fired his weapon, a wild burst of plasma, not to kill, but to distract. The energy bolts lit the chamber, forcing the hunters to scatter for cover. The commander raised his massive blade and blocked the shots with a single sweep, sparks flying. Daniel didn't wait to see more. He sprinted toward the fissure, the girl held tight against his chest. The hunters roared behind him, their weapons firing beams of energy that scorched the ground at his heels. The cavern exploded with noise, shouts, gunfire, and the heavy stomp of armored boots. He reached the fissure and squeezed through, scraping his suit on the jagged stone. The tunnel beyond was narrow, forcing him to crouch as he moved. The girl whimpered faintly, but her arms tightened around him, clinging as if she knew this was their only chance. Behind them, the commander's voice bellowed again, shaking the stone. "You cannot hide, human. She belongs to us." The sound of grinding rock thundered through the passage as the commander struck the fissure with his blade, widening it with terrifying ease. Daniel stumbled forward, deeper into the darkness, his heart racing. The tunnel twisted downward, carrying them into the depths of the earth. Strange symbols lined the walls, glowing faintly as they passed. The girl touched them with her fingers, and they flared brighter, lighting their way. Daniel realized these markings weren't random. They were guiding them, leading them somewhere hidden, somewhere important. But the hunters were not far behind. Their footsteps and metallic voices echoed down the tunnel, relentless and unyielding. At last, the passage opened into another chamber. This one was smaller but stranger, its walls carved into spirals, its floor covered in shallow pools of glowing water. In the center stood a stone pedestal, cracked but still intact. Upon it rested a crystal larger than any Daniel had seen, pulsing like a heart. The girl lifted her head weakly, her glowing eyes fixed on the pedestal. She whispered a single word: "Sanctuary." Daniel didn't understand, but before he could ask, the hunters poured into the chamber. Their weapons lit the air with beams of deadly light. Daniel dove behind the pedestal, firing blindly to keep them back. The crystal pulsed brighter, its glow spreading through the pools on the floor until the entire chamber shimmered with light. The commander stepped into the chamber last, towering above his soldiers. His single eye burned brighter, locking onto the girl. "You cannot protect her," he said. "You do not know what she carries." Daniel's hands tightened on his weapon. He didn't know what secret the girl held, but he knew one thing. As long as he drew breath, they would never take her. The chamber trembled again, the crystal's light building to a blinding intensity. The girl's body glowed brighter too, as though resonating with the stone. The hunters hesitated, their armor flickering with static. And in that moment, Daniel realized something terrifying. The girl wasn't just connected to the crystal. She was awakening it. The chamber pulsed with blinding light, forcing Daniel to shield his eyes. The massive crystal at the center throbbed like a living heart, its glow spreading into the shallow pools that covered the floor. Every ripple of light seemed to pulse in rhythm with the alien girl in his arms. Her glowing lines blazed brighter than ever, as though her very life force was awakening something ancient. The hunters froze at the edges of the chamber, their weapons raised but their movements uncertain. The glow distorted their scanners, causing static to crackle across their armor. Even the commander hesitated, his single burning eye narrowing as though in suspicion rather than fear. Daniel crouched behind the pedestal, his weapon trained on the soldiers, his body tense and ready. He didn't know what the crystal was or why it reacted to her, but he knew it gave them a chance. "Stay with me," he whispered to the girl, though he wasn't sure she could hear him anymore. Her breathing was shallow, but her eyes glowed with fierce determination. Then, from the shadows at the far side of the chamber, a new figure appeared. Daniel's stomach clenched as recognition stabbed through him. It was Lieutenant Mason, Daniel's fellow explorer, his friend. The man who had been sent on the same mission, whose ship had crashed not far from his own. Daniel had thought Mason dead, swallowed by the storm or killed by the hunters. But now here he was, walking calmly through the chaos as though he belonged here. "Mason?" Daniel's voice cracked with disbelief. "You're alive?" Mason gave a slow smile, but there was no warmth in it. His visor reflected the crystal's glow, hiding his eyes. "Alive, yes, but not the way you think." He stepped closer, and Daniel noticed how the hunters did not attack him. In fact, they lowered their weapons slightly as though he were one of them. The realization hit like a blade. "You're with them," Mason chuckled softly. "Not with them, Daniel. Above them. They understand what you do not. That thing you're holding, she isn't salvation. She's a weapon. A key to something that should never be unlocked." His voice grew sharper, laced with anger. "And you've been foolish enough to keep her alive." Daniel's grip on his weapon tightened. "She's not a thing. She's a person. And she trusted me." Mason's smile vanished. His tone turned cold, almost mechanical. "Trust is weakness. You don't see the bigger picture. If her kind succeed, humanity will become prey. The hunters aren't chasing her because they're evil. They're chasing her because they know what happens if she lives. The girl stirred weakly in Daniel's arms, her voice a whisper. "Lies," she breathed, her eyes glowing brighter in protest. Mason's gaze locked onto her, full of disdain. "Even now she manipulates you. She'll burn entire worlds to ash, and you'll be her loyal guard dog, never realizing you've doomed us all." The commander stepped forward then, his towering form casting a shadow over them all. His single red eye flared as he addressed Mason. "Enough words. Deliver the key." Daniel raised his weapon instinctively, but Mason moved faster. With a sudden surge, he grabbed Daniel's arm and slammed it against the pedestal. Pain shot through Daniel's wrist as his weapon clattered to the floor. Mason's strength was unnatural, fueled by something more than human. Daniel fought back, kicking and shoving, but Mason twisted his arm behind his back, forcing him to the ground. The girl cried out faintly, reaching for Daniel, but Mason tore her from his grasp with brutal ease. "No," Daniel roared, struggling to rise, but Mason's boot slammed into his chest, pinning him against the stone floor. The girl writhed in Mason's arms, her glowing lines flaring brighter with panic. The crystal at her chest pulsed wildly, resonating with the massive one at the center of the chamber. The entire room trembled, loose stones raining from the ceiling. Mason sneered down at Daniel. "You never understood. You think this is about saving one girl, but this is about control. With her we could control the hunters, control the galaxy itself, and I intend to be the one holding that power." Daniel's chest burned with rage and betrayal. He had trusted Mason, fought beside him in countless missions, shared food, shared stories of Earth, and now, in this desolate alien cavern, Mason had revealed his true face. The hunters stepped forward, their weapons trained on Daniel. But the commander raised a hand, halting them. His burning eye fixed on Mason and the girl. "If you fail to deliver her human, we will take her by force." Mason's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "She's mine to deliver." Daniel forced himself to his knees, his vision swimming. He looked at the girl, her glowing eyes locked onto his. She whispered his name, not in her language, but in his. Somehow, through pain and fear, she had learned it. "Daniel." The sound of her voice broke something inside him. He clenched his fists, refusing to give in. Betrayed, broken, outnumbered, yet his resolve only hardened. Mason turned toward the commander, holding the girl out like a prize. "Here, the key you wanted." But before the commander could take her, the crystal in the chamber blazed with sudden, blinding light. The ground split and a deafening roar filled the cavern as something ancient stirred beneath the stone. Daniel's heart pounded as the truth struck him. The girl wasn't just the key. She had been brought here for a reason, and Mason, in his greed, had just awakened something far worse. The cavern split with a thunderous crack, shards of crystal raining down like falling stars. The ground shook so violently that even the towering commander staggered to keep his balance. From the fissures beneath the stone, a deep glow surged upward, as though the planet's very heart had been awakened. The air hummed with raw energy, sharp and electric, searing the lungs with every breath. Daniel pushed himself up from the ground, his chest aching where Mason's boot had slammed him down. Dust clung to his visor and blood smeared the edge of his cracked suit. He could barely stand, but rage and determination burned hotter than pain. He would not let Mason hand her over. Not after everything. The girl struggled weakly in Mason's arms, her glowing lines blazing in rhythm with the cavern's heartbeat. She was no longer just a frightened alien. She was the spark that had lit something ancient. Something neither Mason nor the hunters could truly control. Daniel saw it in her eyes. Fear, yes, but also defiance. The commander's voice rumbled through the chamber deeper than thunder. "She is awake. The key must be contained." His soldiers raised their weapons, aiming at Mason as much as Daniel. To them, humans were pawns, nothing more. Mason held the girl tighter, his expression twisted with greed. "No, she's mine. With her I can command this power. I will not hand her over to you." The commander's burning eye flared. "Then you will die with the others." The cavern erupted in chaos. The hunters surged forward, firing beams of crimson energy. Mason dove for cover, dragging the girl with him while Daniel rolled behind a jagged boulder, plasma bolts scorching the stone. The massive crystal in the center of the room pulsed brighter with each shot fired, resonating with the girl's glow until the air shimmered with unstable light. Daniel snatched up his weapon and fired. A hunter fell, its armor cracking under the impact. Another advanced, blade flashing, but Daniel dodged and blasted its chest at point-blank range. Sparks showered the floor. He moved like a man possessed, his body driven by pure will, every strike fueled by the promise he had made to protect her. Across the chamber, Mason fought too, but not for her. He used her glow as a shield, ducking behind her whenever the hunters aimed too close, firing wildly in his desperation to escape with her. The sight filled Daniel with fury. She wasn't a shield, wasn't a weapon, she was alive. Let her go. Daniel roared, charging forward. Mason spun, firing a shot that grazed Daniel's shoulder, searing pain tearing through his arm. But Daniel didn't stop. He tackled Mason, both men crashing to the crystal floor. The girl tumbled free, sliding across the glowing pools, her fragile body hitting the pedestal with a soft cry. Daniel and Mason grappled, fists slamming, blood mixing with dust. Mason's strength was monstrous, enhanced by whatever deal he had made with the hunters. He struck Daniel across the face, visor cracking further, then pressed his hand to Daniel's throat. "You were always weak," Mason snarled. "Always too human. That's why you'll lose." Daniel gasped for breath, his vision dimming. But through the haze, he saw the girl. She had crawled onto the pedestal, her crystal shard glowing in her trembling hands. The massive crystal above her pulsed in answer, building toward a blinding crescendo. "No," Mason whispered, his grip faltering as he realized what she was doing. Daniel seized the chance. With every last ounce of strength, he slammed his fist into Mason's jaw, then drove his blade into his side. Mason let out a strangled cry, collapsing to the floor, his armor sparking and hissing. The hunters closed in, their weapons charging. The commander raised his massive blade, energy screaming along its edge. But before he could strike, the girl pressed her shard into the heart of the pedestal. The chamber exploded with light. A shockwave ripped through the hunters, tearing their armor apart, flinging them across the cavern like broken dolls. The commander staggered, his burning eye flickering wildly, his blade shattering in his hand. His roar of rage shook the stones, but the light consumed him, swallowing his towering form until nothing remained but a smoldering husk. Daniel shielded his face, his body shaking as the energy surged around him. When the light finally dimmed, silence fell over the chamber. The hunters were gone. Mason lay motionless, his body broken. The girl slumped against the pedestal, her glow fading to a soft flicker. Daniel stumbled to her side, dropping his weapon. He cradled her gently, his voice breaking. "You did it. You saved us." Her eyes fluttered open, weak but steady. She whispered, "Not saved. Not yet." Her gaze drifted to the star map still glowing faintly above the crystal. "More will come. Bigger. Stronger." Daniel's heart sank. This battle had been hell, but it was only a beginning. Still, as he held her in his arms, he made his choice again. The same choice he had made when he first pulled her from the pod. He would protect her. Against hunters, traitors, commanders, against the entire galaxy if he had to, because he was human. And humans didn't give up. Silence clung to the cavern after the battle, broken only by the drip of water echoing from unseen cracks. The massive crystal, once blazing like a star, now pulsed faintly, as if exhausted by what it had unleashed. Smoke curled from the shattered bodies of the hunters, their red eyes extinguished forever. Mason's broken form lay twisted among the rubble, his greedy ambitions reduced to nothing. Daniel knelt on the cold stone, the alien girl trembling weakly in his arms. Her glow had faded, her lines dim and faint, but her eyes, those bright, haunting eyes, still watched him with quiet strength. He brushed the dust from her face with a trembling hand. "It's over," he whispered, though even as he spoke the words, he knew they weren't true. The girl's lips moved, her voice soft and strained. "No, not over." She turned her gaze to the massive crystal at the chamber's heart. It pulsed once more, brighter, and the star map appeared in the air again. But this time it was different. The constellations spread wider, stars shifting into new positions, their glow sharper, colder. Entire clusters lit up red, as if marked for destruction. Daniel stared at the projection, his breath catching in his throat. "What is this?" he asked. The girl's hand tightened weakly on his sleeve. "Warning!" Images flashed in the map, planets burning, fleets torn apart, shadows devouring entire systems. Daniel felt the weight of it press into his chest, an understanding too heavy to bear. This wasn't just about her. This wasn't just about her people or the hunters. This was something older, deeper, far more terrifying. The crystal shard on her chest flared and her voice trembled as she whispered, "I am the key, in me, memory of ancient war, weapon sealed my people, made me carry it." Daniel's stomach twisted. The visions he had seen before made sense now. She wasn't only a survivor, she was a vessel, carrying within her the genetic code to unlock a weapon so devastating the hunters themselves had feared it. A weapon powerful enough to decide the fate of galaxies. He shook his head, overwhelmed. "Why me? Why did I find you?" Her glowing eyes softened, shimmering with sorrow. "Not chance, chosen, crystal. Called you." The thought made Daniel's blood run cold. If the crystal had drawn him here, then his survival, his meeting with her, it had never been an accident. He had been led into this, pushed onto a path that no human was meant to walk. The cavern groaned, dust raining down again. The storm outside was fading, but the planet itself seemed restless, as if awakening along with the girl. Daniel knew they couldn't stay. He forced himself to his feet, lifting her once more. His body screamed with exhaustion, but he pushed forward, guided by the dim glow of the markings along the tunnel. As they climbed out of the cavern, he glanced back one last time. The crystal pulsed faintly in the dark, the star map still burning in the air. So many stars marked red, so many worlds already doomed. The image seared itself into his memory. They emerged into the open. The storm had passed, leaving the sky raw and bruised, streaked with the dying glow of alien fire. The hunter ships were gone, destroyed or fled. The air was strangely still, heavy with the weight of what had happened. The girl rested her head against his shoulder, her voice a whisper barely louder than the wind. "More will come. Stronger, hungrier. You saved me, but danger only grows." Daniel swallowed hard, staring at the alien horizon. He had risked everything to save her, and he would do it again. But the truth gnawed at him. What he had discovered would not just change his life. It would haunt humanity itself. He looked down at her, fragile and radiant in his arms. "We'll fight them," he said firmly, though inside he felt the weight of doubt. "Whatever comes, we'll face it together." Her glowing eyes met his, a flicker of hope and sadness mingled within them. She whispered one final phrase, her words clear, heavy, unforgettable. "Your people will never be the same again." The horizon shimmered with faint light, as though distant fleets were already on their way. Daniel tightened his grip on her, his heart steady despite the dread building in his chest. He had chosen his path. There was no going back, and as the first light of dawn broke over the ruined world, he knew the haunting truth. By saving her, he had not just saved one life. He had ignited a war that would decide the fate of all humanity.